So having noticed this confrontation between religion and science, and faith and reason generally, many of us have become what is now called religious moderates. The religious moderation really is the flavor of religion that is acceptable to so many people who are otherwise rigorously honest in intellectual terms. And in my book, I criticize religious moderation rather harshly, and this has actually been some of the most controversial material in my book. So I just want to run through my argument briefly about this because it has raised some hackles. The first thing to say up front is just that religious moderation is better than fundamentalism. There's no doubt about that. Religious moderates don't fly planes into buildings. Religious moderates don't organize their lives around apocalyptic prophecy, and that's a very good thing. But religious moderation has some real problems. The first is that it gives cover to fundamentalism. Because religious moderates have made it taboo to criticize faith. They want faith respected. They want the whole project of being religious, being identified as a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, to be respected. That it is impossible to call into question this basic project, that the ethical tenability of raising a child to believe he's a Christian as opposed to anything else. And under the cover of this respect, we are now powerless to say the very harsh and necessary things about religious extremism that we need to say, because it is taboo. You have to respect faith. Religious moderation prevents us from even noticing the differences among our religions. It is taboo to notice that all our religions are not teaching the same thing. They're not all equally wise, and where they do teach the same thing, they don't teach it equally well. I mean, where are the Tibetan Buddhist suicide bombers? I mean, if you think for a moment that the kind of violence we see in the Muslim world is born of the Israeli occupation and our misadventures in Iraq, we should see Tibetan Buddhist suicide bombers. The Tibetans have suffered an occupation every bit as brutal and far more cynical than any that we or the British or the Israelis have imposed upon the Muslim world. Something like 1.2 million Tibetans have died since the Chinese occupation. Where are the throngs of Tibetans in the streets calling for the deaths of Chinese non-combatants? Where are the Tibetans blowing themselves up on Chinese buses, at weddings, in crowds of children, in front of the offices of the Red Cross and the UN? It's not happening. It's not likely to happen. It's not that you could not possibly form a death cult out of the principles of Tibetan Buddhism. In fact, to some degree, Zen Buddhism informed the worldview of the kamikaze pilots during World War II. But you would have to work very hard to bend the core principles of Buddhism into this kind of orgy of violence. You don't have to work so hard as a Muslim. And it would be impossible as a Jain. I mean, the Jains, this religion of India that has some 10 million subscribers, I think, the core of their religion is nonviolence. No matter how deranged you get by your doctrine as a Jain, you will get less and less violent. I mean, the really religious Jains cover their mouths with cheesecloths so they don't inhale a bug. By no stretch of the imagination can you argue that the core principle of Islam is nonviolence. It is taboo to notice this, and it is especially taboo among religious moderates. Our own religious demagogues will notice this. We can have, Franklin Graham will stand up and say, Islam is an evil religion. They'll notice the differences between religions. Everyone else has the wrong religion. But religious moderates have rendered this taboo. I want to point out that I'm not talking about a race or ethnicity. I'm talking about the consequences of ideas. When I talk about Islam, I'm talking about John Walker Lynn, the white guy from Marin County who went off to fight with the Taliban. We are at war, to digress briefly into the our current situation. We are at war with Islamic fundamentalism. Not merely Al-Qaeda, not extremist Islam. The mainstream doctrine of Islam contains this notion of martyrdom and jihad. It contains this imperative to convert, subjugate, or kill infidels. Anyone who says it doesn't has not read the Quran, has not read the Hadith, or is lying about them. It is taboo to notice this. If you doubt this, if you think, I'm sure there are people in this room who are still thinking, no, it can't be religion. This is lack of economic opportunity. It's lack of educational opportunity in the Muslim world. Just contemplate for a moment the biographies of the 19 men who woke up on September 11th, 2001 and decided to slit the throats of stewardesses and fly planes into buildings. Okay, these guys were college educated to a man. Many of them had PhDs. Many of them had been educated in the West. They were middle class or better. I don't know how many architects and engineers need to hit the wall at 400 miles an hour for us to get it into our heads that this is not merely a problem of education or economics. These were not guys who had spent a lot of time agitating about regime change in the Middle East. These were guys who spent an inordinate amount of time at their local mosque in Hamburg talking about the pleasures that await martyrs in paradise and demonizing infidel culture. The circumstance we are in is much more sinister than many want to realize. It is possible to be so well educated that you can build a nuclear bomb and to still think you're going to get the 72 virgins in paradise. That is how partitioned the human mind is, and that is how balkanized our discourse is. That is how immune religious propositions are to critical pressure, conversational pressure in our discourse. 40% of scientists believe in a biblical God. That does not suggest that there are good scientific reasons to believe in a biblical God. That suggests that 60% of scientists are not doing their jobs. That there really is an argument to be won here. So the problem with religious moderation, another problem, is that moderates are blinded by their own moderation. A moderate doesn't know what it's like to be certain of paradise. A moderate doesn't know what it's like to be certain of God, to be certain that the book he keeps by his bedside is the perfect word of the creator of the universe. And so when the moderate sees the jihadist in the video camera saying things like, "We love death more than the infidel loves life," and then he blows himself up, it's the moderate who's left wondering, well, that couldn't be faith. I mean, that's propaganda, I don't know what that was, but that's not religion. So it is really the discourse of religious moderation that keeps convincing us that religion is not the problem, that this violence would happen anyway, that these 19 guys would have killed a lot of people anyway. There's no evidence for that. Another problem with religious moderation is that it is intellectually bankrupt. It really represents a fundamentally unprincipled use of reason. At least fundamentalists talk about evidence. You ask a fundamentalist, why do you believe that Jesus was the Son of God and the Bible is the perfect Word of God? You'll get reasons. They're not good reasons, but you will immediately see that these people are engaged in an evidentiary pursuit. They'll say things like, the New Testament confirms all of Old Testament prophecy, or every prophecy in the Bible has come true. These are specious claims, but contrast that to what moderates say. Moderates don't talk about evidence.